Okay, guys, so today what we were supposed to do was evolution, and I'm just going to talk you through it quite quickly, okay? Now, evolution is a really, really important topic. Since humanity began, man, us humans, since we've been able to think for ourselves, we have wondered how and where we came from. And evolution attempts to answer this question. So, how we became humans, essentially. Um, so, learning outcome for today is to describe evolution and explain the role of natural selection within the process, to state the meaning of evolution, to describe the process of natural selection, and to evaluate the importance of Darwin's work. And Darwin's work was really, really important. It shook the scientific community. As you might know, before Darwin, people believed that all animals were created as is. They were made perfect, humans were made perfect, and there was no change, nothing. Uh, Darwin's work, groundbreaking. It is controversial, and it is still controversial to this day. So we're going to have a look at it. So evolution in itself just means a gradual change in species over time. So when I say over time, I mean over thousands and thousands of years. And gradual meaning just small, small changes. As we said before, a species is a group of organisms that are capable of interbreeding to produce fertile offspring. So they're just a group of organisms that have similar characteristics that can make babies. So is there any evidence for evolution? Yes, of course, there's a lot. So, for example, there's fossil evidence. So the fossil record provides the most evidence for evolution. Fossils are just well-preserved bones or plants or anything that's preserved well in the rocks. Looking at fossils, we can see that organisms such as the dinosaur existed millions of years ago, and they are no longer in existence. Other animals that have gone extinct, the woolly mammoth, we can find their fossils as well. Also, looking at the fossil record, we can see how animals have changed over time. So here we can see the evolution of the horse, and we can see how it has changed from this to this. And really, these changes came with the horse's environment. So as the environment of the horse changed, the horse changed itself. Perfect. So where did evolution begin? How did it start? So evolution started with unicellular organisms. So these were organisms quite similar to bacteria. So they lived on Earth billions of years ago, and they lived in the water. Over time, they evolved, they changed to become multicellular organisms. So these unicellular, one-cell organisms started working together, and they started to become multicellular. And then if you remember, you are made up of thousands and thousands and thousands of cells. So, yeah. And then eventually the process resulted in organisms that could also live on the land and in the air and all around us. So how do organisms evolve then? The scientists back in the 19th century, they had realized by looking at the fossil record that organisms were changing. They did not just stay the same. So then they started to wonder, how could this possibly happen? And we are going to look at that now. Okay, so the first man who proposed an idea of how evolution happened, his name was Jean-Baptiste Lamarck. He was French. And he proposed his theory of use and disuse. And in his idea, he believed that the more an organism used something, kind of the bigger it got. So then they passed on this acquired trait, meaning they got it in their lifetime. They passed that on to the next generation. So if we look at the example of the giraffe here, so the giraffe ancestor with a shorter neck, and as it used its neck to reach higher and higher, Lamarck believed that it got longer and longer. However, this we now know is not the case. And we will look into Darwin's theory of natural selection in a minute. So Charles Darwin, the original OG big, major scientist, one of the most influential people on Earth ever. He was born into quite a wealthy family, and his father wanted him to be a doctor, but he thought, nah, I'm going to go travel the world in a ship instead. And that's what he did. So for 5 years, Darwin traveled the world in a ship called the Beagle. On this trip, he took a notebook and he just wrote down everything he saw. And he collected specimens of wild animals. And he began to notice some similarities and differences between animals on different islands, especially in the Galapagos. That's where the Galapagos Island off the coast of South America is where he started to develop his theory. And he made some observations. So observation number one was that organisms produce a large number of offspring. And this is a large number of potential offspring. So if we imagine plants produce a lot of seeds, humans have the potential to reproduce every year. Men produce a lot of sperm. We overproduce our potential. However, the populations remain constant, don't change. Unless for humans are the exception to this. But maybe we can think about why later. But the population of most animals don't change. Darwin concluded that perhaps not all offspring survive into adulthood. So that there's a struggle for survival. If we look at humans as an example, we could say that humans' populations can expand exponentially. So they just keep growing and growing and growing. But things like shortage of supplies, shortage of food, famine, disease, war, these all impact our population and we bring them down. So the human population at the moment is expanding because we are minimizing our war capacity, hopefully. We are fighting diseases better than we've ever fought before. And we are creating new resources. So for these reasons, our populations are expanding, even now. Even during COVID, we're still expanding. Here's just an example again of the seeds, or a lot of seeds are produced, a lot of flies can be reproduced. Not all of the seeds grow into a plant, so there's a struggle for survival. And then again, not all of the fly larvae live. Darwin's second observation was that variation exists. And remember, we mean variation differences between members of the same species. And much of this variation is heritable, so we can inherit it. It's an inherited characteristic. So Darwin concluded that any organism that has a variation, a difference, that gives them an advantage, a survival advantage in their environment, they are more likely to live to adulthood and then pass on this variation to the next generation. And this is known as natural selection. So over a long time, these variations become numerous in the population and new species will emerge. So if we look at the example here of the cheetah, so the cheetah is hunting the antelopes, maybe, and obviously the fastest ones are going to be the ones that survive. If you inherit a gene from your parents to be a slow antelope, you're a goner. You are not passing that gene on to the next generation. So this is the principle that if you are adapted to your environment, if you are the best adapted to your environment, you are going to survive and you will pass on your genes. Look at another example here. So if we can see the beetles, there's a population of green and brown beetles. This bird can see the green beetles more easily in the environment, so the bird eats the green beetles. So they're less likely to live and pass on their genes. The brown beetles numbers start to increase because there's more, and then there's more brown beetles till eventually brown beetles take over. And this is natural selection. Before we go on to that, I just want to go back to the giraffe example. So with Darwin's theory of evolution then, it would be the advantage comes from having a longer neck. So any giraffe that by chance was born with a longer neck can reach higher than the other giraffes, therefore more likely to get food, more likely to survive, more likely to pass on these genes to the next generation. Okay, so then let's just, last quote for the day from Darwin. It's not the strongest of the species that survives or the most intelligent, but it's the ones that are most responsive to change. It is the species that can adapt. because our environments are always changing. So we need to be able to be adaptable to survive, like we're doing in this class. So on that note, if you've watched this far, congratulations, you're getting an A. Joking. Well, maybe not. Okay. And stop recording.